Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Lightleaders. Today, I'm with Professor Spira, who is also a big influence in my living food / raw food / fruitarian journey I've been on. So just as a recap, for a year and 3 months, I've been almost only on mainly fruits and raw foods. I was doing 1 meal a day, almost dropped that 1 raw meal a day recently to do mainly sweet fruits. And I've been interviewing a few people like Josh X, Eli Martyr, Brian Mirabella, and Dr. Doug Graham on this topic, and trying to do it well, because for me, it's working pretty well so far. At the same time, I know a lot of fruitarian, vegan people who tell me, yeah, it's going to work for 2 and 3 years, and then you'll see. So I'm trying to do it right. And that's why I have interviews with the top experts in the area. So I'm very grateful to have you, Professor Spira, on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex.
So I was telling you, I've read the Mucusless healing system, the Mucusless diet by Professor Arnold Herrett, recommending that to everyone. I haven't read yet your revised version, but I think it might be a good idea because this book is amazing, but I think it's from the 20s or something. And I've learned a lot, but it can work to have a little update and your view on it. I've watched a lot of your videos, so encouraging people to go on your YouTube. I'll put the link at the bottom of the video in the description. And of course, for anyone wanting to support the podcast, the Lightleaders, please like this video, subscribe, and share if you like what we're talking about. I'll share a bit what we're going to talk about. So that's the little intro. Then Professor Spira will talk a bit about his personal life experience, getting into a healthier diet, and then about the mucusless diet healing system that you're a big fan of. And then I'll have a lot of questions. I'll have questions on in the book. Also, I read talks about sexuality and periods, talks about enema, about fitness, water, many things. So for people watching the video, if you're on YouTube, you can look in the chapters and go also straight to the section that you're mostly interested in. That's a possibility. And yeah, that's for the intro. And now let's get rolling. So thank you, Professor Spira. And well, I have a first question before we get into it is, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for the air. I'm grateful for this air gas engine body that I have, and that it's unobstructed enough that I may breathe without ailments and issues and clean my blood up, and that I have the opportunity to clean myself up and to try to really clean myself up and change the entire trajectory of my bloodline. Whoop, I think you hit the mute on accident.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And sometimes I feel I have way less mucus than I used to when I started the journey. I still sometimes do my pranayama in the morning, and it's not perfect yet. There's still a little bit obstructing. After some time, do you feel like it's like perfectly clean?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, yeah, the inflammation. Well, and what can happen, you can go through a period where there's like no mucus, but if you got any old inflammation that still needs the detox out of your system, then that can kind of flare up sometimes there. And I had a lot of damage done to my sinuses when I was really young, with all the medications they put me on and stuff. And so I had to do a lot of work up here and really almost like reconstruct my entire sinus cavity, which you do through eating the way we eat and fasting and all of those great healing dynamics. But yeah, it definitely goes away. And what I would say, I take it for granted because I remember before, but your sense of smell just goes off the charts, where you can just smell things that no one else is smelling. You smell it first, and you're just something's going on over there, and then people are like, I don't smell anything, and then they smell it like 5 minutes later. And so yeah, clearing all this up definitely makes a big difference.
Nice. Well, that ties into your story. Do you want to share a bit, Professor Spira, about how you got into the mucusless diet?
Yeah. So basically, growing up, I was always really, really sick. I had really bad ear infections all the time, migraine headaches almost every day, allergies for which I took medications since I was very young until I started practicing this lifestyle for a number of years. And I thought it was genetic. That was the misinformation that people gave me, that, well, I had a very sick mother and it just runs in my family. And so that I'm just destined to be sick like this all the time. And when I was 10 years old, my grandmother passed away, and I developed a mother-son bond with her because my mother was always sick and in and out of the hospital. So my grandma and my aunt raised me. I was most of the time I was over there. And so she died when I was 10, and that totally devastated me because I didn't understand this death thing and what's going on. A week after that, my mother went into the hospital after having a heart attack, got double bypass surgery. Then a couple months after that, she had both of her legs amputated because of gangrene. And about a year and a half after that, she passed away. And she had never come back home. She had just stayed in a nursing home. So as a young person, I was in this environment for long periods of time, because my aunt always took me over to visit my mom almost every other day. And so as a young person, I'm wanting to go out and play and all that kind of stuff all the time. And it's like, no, we got to go visit your mom. And so being in this environment, I used to just look around and just say to myself, like, this is wrong. Something about all of this. Like, I'm not accepting this reality as something that is normal. Just that entire system. And I was real young, didn't really understand what was going on, but I just saw so much suffering and so much human suffering that is not being addressed in all of the media that we watch, that we consume. I don't see this things represented that's in sitcoms, or that it's in even the different dramas and stuff. They're not covering this, and even these hospital shows, they're not showing this, what I was seeing. So fast forward to when I graduate high school. By that point, over 250 pounds, on my way to be 300 pounds. Over the next year, I would pick up another 50 pounds while I was in college, get all the way up to 300 pounds, addicted to cigarettes, addicted to, tobacco, smoking weed, drinking all the time when I'm not focused in on school. And about a year after going to college, that's when I heard about the Mucusless diet healing system by Professor Arnold Ehret. I was at a jam session, and a friend of mine, Willie Smart, aka Brother Air, had been practicing the diet for over 20 years. And we're in between sets, and they had this big buffet, and we got this big plate of all this chicken wings and all these nasty food. And I'm just sitting there eating across from him, and he just gives us this look, as me and my friend, and he just, like, he couldn't hold it in anymore, because he's trying not to just, I guess he wanted to not talk about as long as he could, but he finally he had to let us have it. So just told us all about just diet. And, he has an interesting way of hitting things that just kind of open your eyes up in a new way. And I just looked down at that plate of chicken, and I just and I just stopped eating it. Like, okay, I guess I'm not going to eat this anymore. And he told me about the Mucusless diet, and I read the book, and 6 months later, I lost 100 pounds, got off of the pharmaceutical medications, got off of the CPAP unit that I'd been on, just total transformation. Looked way younger than I looked older. I was 19 years old. It looked like I was in my 30s. And so I went back to looking kind of like I was like 15 or something. And I didn't look back. I just kept pushing forward, just really dedicating myself to living the lifestyle, studying, like deeply studying the information, the history.
How old are you now?
So I'll be 40 in a couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, looking good.
Looking
good.
Ah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, so that was that. And of course there was where I did this in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is one of the worst places to practice the diet. But I think that's also why a lot of the practitioners, the original practitioners that I knew of, like the original long-term practitioners, came from Cincinnati, Ohio, because it's almost like the opposites, where you're in an environment that is not friendly at all to what you're doing. But if you have the right spirit, then that actually inspires you and pushes you to go further. That being around all of this madness and this backward thinking inspired me to fast. I just was like, I don't want to be anything like these people. So I'm going to fast. I'm going to clean myself out. I'm going to do my enemas. And that was so in that case, the environment helped for a while. Then it was time to get out of that environment. And I moved up to Columbus, where I currently am. And, now I got my sights set on the next move down to someplace a lot closer to the equator. And, which is, definitely more where we should be at. But yeah, in a nutshell, if for folks that are watching in, here's the before and after. On the left, about 300 pounds. And, because these two pictures were taken a year apart exactly. Those pictures are from my resident advisor ID badge. I was a resident advisor for a dormitory in college. And that's where those pictures came from. And I had literally started like right here is when I had started practicing the Mucusless diet, or I'd practiced it a little while. I'd already lost just a little bit of weight by the time that took that picture. But yeah, it's been a trip. It's been a heck of a journey.
Nice. And well, tell us a bit about the Mucusless diet then, what it's about mainly. Like, obviously there's a whole book people can go through. You have a lot of videos, so it's not the purpose here to go through all of it, but in a 5-minute nutshell.
Just a quick, just the overview. So this is as you showed the older book, and this is my version of the annotated, revised, and edited edition, which it has the original text with some editor, like edited some things here and there just to make a little more sense. And then, every famous and important book in history has an annotated version, whether you're talking about the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tom Sawyer, whatever the book is, they have annotated versions. And I thought to myself, if any book on the planet deserves an annotated version, the Mucusless Diet Healing System does. And so in the footnotes, I define terms that people generally don't know, and people that there's sometimes, this book was written in 1920, or the articles, anywhere from between 1910 and 1920, it's a number of different articles put together. But there's just stuff that people just didn't know. And part of when I was getting into practicing diet, people would ask me a lot of questions about the lifestyle and about the diet. And then I realized that I had this ability to break it down and explain it to people in a way that they would understand it. And as I did my research, I just saw that a lot of people consistently had the same questions and misconceptions, misunderstandings after having just read the book. And so I try to address all of those kinds of things in my version. But the diet itself, so the Mucusless diet healing system is a transitional dietary and lifestyle system where you're transitioning from whatever diet that you currently have to one that is mucus free. What foods cause mucus? You got there, and so pus and mucus forming foods. So pus forming foods are meat and dairy, any kind of animal product. So when we use the word pus, we're not necessarily saying that it has to be infected tissue. It's just tissue. As it decays, it turns into this very concentrated form of mucus that we're calling pus. The things in the a lot of plant-based mucuses or mucus forming foods. You got your grains, starches, the fatty vegetables or fatty fruits, and those kinds of things cause mucus. Not all mucus is created equal. So there are certain things that we use for transitional purposes and other things that we recommend that you get off of immediately, or that you really try to get off of immediately. And you do this by a systematic way of eating. And so there's a number of principles that are in the Mucusless Diet Healing System book on food combining and how you incorporate fasting into your dietary program, how you use, and I call them ancillary therapies such as enemas, colon irrigation, sunbathing, exercise, walking, dancing. Like all of these things are discussed in the book. Herbology, ancillary therapy. These are all different things that are touched on in different ways in the book and make up the system. So what sets the Mucusless Diet Healing System apart from everything else that I know of that's out here that gets different traction in books and things that people get into is this is a real system. You know, it's not a foods list diet. It's not, okay, here are the foods that you're allowed to eat. Good luck. Go just eat from this list. That's not how it works, because it's about a systematic application of the food, and to just progressively change your menu, change your diet and change the menus you're eating over time, so that you change your physiology and your mental aspect changes as well as you go. So there's no, it's not like this, like, okay, I gotta be 100% something. I gotta be right away. I gotta do this and that. It's like, no, it's a much more, to me, rational approach to this transformation, which allows people to be able to be more successful long term, because you permanently transform your body to the point where you can't go back to certain items. You can't go back. If you've done this right, you can't go back to this, you know, where, like you're talking about the fruitarians that are falling off the wagon and going back and eating, you know, raw meat and whatever the heck is going on. But every time that happens, I almost every time when I look at those people, I'm like, those are people that didn't transition. They just disregarded any kind of transition diet methodology. They thought they were better than the transition diet, and that was the result.
Going too fast, too quickly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I vibe with that. I'm the same. I feel if I really want some cooked food sometimes, or if I really want like that extra little oily thing, or it's, you know, I allow myself. And with time, it's not so much of a discipline. Like, I mean, obviously we'll see how I go. I'm still young in the process, but I've started being mainly vegan 4 years ago. And then since then, it's been a very gradual evolution of, going towards vegan mainly, and then towards more raw, and then towards more fruits, and towards less and less alcohol and less coffee. So even if you take coffee, I didn't really, even cigarettes, I didn't really forbid myself to have any coffee. I just became more and more conscious. And for example, until like a year and a half ago, I was thinking, well, 1 or 2 coffee a month is nice, is a treat. And usually when I'm here in Ubud in Bali, and I'd go to Uluwatu and have a surf, and that was my moment. After a good surf, that, oh, that's like my moment in the month. I'll have a nice coffee. And like about a year and a half ago, I had a good surf. It was my moment. I have a nice coffee, and I was like, I don't really want it. Like I didn't want it anymore.
Right.
And a lot of things, it's like I went back to it less and less frequently, while still allowing myself, to a point when I didn't really want it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the key. That's what you want to get it to, where you don't want what you're not supposed to have. You know, and if you crave anything, you crave the things that you're supposed to have. But you know, it takes time. And then sometimes people don't like that part of it, that it takes time. You know, they want to try to do it overnight, but we didn't put our bodies in this condition overnight. You know, it happened over generations and generations of wrong, improper eating, improper living that our ancestors did. And so the job that we're doing, which is, in my opinion, the best job for us to be doing, is to try to reverse that trend, to reconstruct our bloodline, and in doing so, reconstruct humanity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And also one thing that helped, it helped me quit cigarette. I would feel into the taste of it, like it's mindfulness, right? Like, and sometimes also 2 hours after a meal at lunch, when I was still working back in the time, I'd write down how I feel. And this kind of things goes from, okay, I read the book, I know what I should do, it makes sense, to having the embodied, like almost wisdom in the body of knowing what's right and feeling it.
Yeah, because once you detox that stuff out, whether when you're talking like the alcohol or cigarettes or coffee, and those kind of, like, I call a lot of those acid forming stimulants, they're just acid forming. But they, once you get those poisons out of your system, you rewire your brain. It doesn't want them anymore because it knows that you feel better without it than with it. And that's, but it takes it takes some discipline. It takes you practicing the system to get to that point where you've removed the ties to some of those kinds of addictions.
Well, it rewires your brain, and even on a more physical level, and we'll get into detox, it also removes parasites, for example, that have their own consciousness. And I could feel it sometimes. Like I'm sure I still have parasites, but when I, at a time when I probably had more, I could feel sometimes like my mind, it's almost like my mind and body agree on what we should have, but there's an entity within me that is asking for something else, for that extra meal or for that dessert. And for me, that's interesting to take into account, that who we are, consciousness is like, it's hard to define. It's not even really a center in the brain, and there's all those entities, from parasites to even the good bacteria and microbiome that want stuff too, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you clean yourself up, you get to the point where nothing can live in you that's not supposed to be there. They just can't. A lot of these parasites, that they thrive in the filth. And when your intestines and your colon are filled with uneliminated acid matter and slimy matter, then you become a breeding ground for disease, as Eric says in the Mucusless Diet book. You're like as he said, a walking cesspool, and that's what we're dealing with. And that's become normality. To walk around with 32 feet of impacted intestines and 20-30 pounds of uneliminated fecal matter and slime and waste and toxic kind of stuff, that's the result of years of eating these processed foods, these mucus forming foods, all the fake foods, all this stuff. It was bad enough hundreds of years ago, just folks eating the white potatoes out of the ground and the meat and whatever it was, the breads that were being made. But now it's at a whole different level when you get into the fast food revolution of the past 30-40 years, and just the culture that comes along with it, that really supports this kind of eating and living. And what that does to the brain is totally not understood, because I like to oftentimes point to how eating directly affects our behavior, because when things happen, folks are always looking for something to blame. And what do we blame? And if somebody, because over here in the United States, we have school shootings all the time, where people go into schools and just start shooting little babies and children, and just what compels somebody to do that? They always want to blame, oh, well, they were just mentally disturbed, or they did that. I'm saying, what were they eating? Because I can guarantee you that none of these shooters were eating fruits and green leafy vegetables for any kind of extended period of time. And when people want to push back on that, and they say, well, I eat pus and mucus. They don't say that, but they'll be like, well, I eat what that guy was eating and I don't behave like that. But the thing is, you don't realize how you're behaving. You're blind to that until you make the change and you start to realize like, oh, wow, your value system totally changes. The things you're attracted to change. Things attracted to you change and transform. And you can't explain that to somebody. That once you get into that, they have to experience that and or at least observe it, because I've had a lot of people observe that in children where just changing their diet to a vegan diet made the child's behavior just got a lot better. But these are deep issues. And so we say that the eating of pus and mucus forming foods by humanity is the number one cause of all human suffering on the planet. Like anything that's bad that's happening, you can trace it back in some way, shape, or form back to pus and mucus eating.
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, to go again on the on why it's not working, because we started also that conversation. Then I'll go deeper into the detox, and actually that also ties to something we'll talk about, which is more in like you living in the USA and how it fits into that culture, which is. But anyway, going back to why it doesn't work. So, do you feel the transition part is the main reason why? People, they do raw food, and they're like, I feel like I need some meat, and they go on raw organ meat, for example, which I've seen here, or they feel like a great liberation to, I can eat what I want. And I know people who have done like the raw food thing for like 4 years or 5 years, not just like 3 months, and still after years and years of being into that detox world, still go back to the meat.
Yeah, because, and this was something, so my friend, brother Air, and he was pretty hardcore about that, because at the time that I met him, he had practiced the diet for 20 years. And he practiced a very disciplined, but like right by the book transition diet methodology. And when I had met him, after 20 years, that was the first time that he had then did an entire year eating nothing but fruit. So 20 years in, it took 20 years of transitioning by the book, and 20 years in, he ate nothing but fruit for an entire year. And after that, he started getting into these long juice fasts, where he fasted 8.5 months, then took a couple months where he was eating, and then fasted 9.5 months. Then what's that?
Water fast?
Juice fast.
Juice fast.
So he either does juice fasting or dry fasting. So he doesn't water fast. And he did a 40-day dry fast like last year, and he intermittently does. So he'll intermittent between juice and dry. He does a lot of that. Is just part of his practice. But so the years after that, like, because as soon as I met him, then it was almost like, so if you want to just call him almost a liquidarian, if you wanted to, but a lot of these words are stupid, they don't mean anything, but it was but within the context of the Mucusless diet healing system, it's just part of the transition, because it's not everybody has to do what he did. That was his expression. And that's why I look at this path and this practice as an art form. It's like, what are you? Okay, we all start with the same principles, the same methodologies, the same transition recommendations. What are you going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? It's not like this, where people try to talk about, well, it's not scientific. It was like, no, it's not. It's an art form. And because an art form requires an aptitude of yourself, understanding how you relate to the methodologies. Like, here's the boundaries and the methodologies that we're using. How does that relate to your individual body, your individual experience?
Which I like. And as a parenthesis right now for the listener, I want to precise also in that interview, it's a little bit advanced in a way, because I asked the questions I've already had a lot of interviews and I've watched a lot of your videos, and we go into things that like I'm not as interested as the scientific reason. Where does B12 come from, and do we need the proteins? Because I feel it's more like it's for people who already kind of try it and feel it, and rather than trying to find exact ratios and
well, and
number.
I'm saying nobody should do that. Like and that's where we stand aside. And I'm saying that's a waste of time for everybody, because it's not natural. The most of our nutrition theories are based on totally wrong frameworks, from the calorie theory and the protein theory, and they're new. These theories are ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. The word protein was invented in 1832, and it was invented wrong. It was, the whole principle of it is wrong. And so I encourage people to take a look at the foundation. If you really want to be educated, you want to really understand things, don't take anything for face value. Take what we're talking about and study it, look into it. But when you're talking about a lot of those theories and trying to, the reductivism, like reducing everything down, that is a tradition of the post-Renaissance Western culture that has led people to the kind of disease and degeneration that we see, because we're humans aren't getting better overall. We have the handful of us that study this and that are into these lifestyles, but we're very much the exception when you look at the mainstream all over the world. And all over the world, the length of life is shortening, and the quality of life is short. They'll try to say, oh, life is getting longer because they're pumping people up with all of these chemical concoctions. But the quality of life is horrible. And I saw the quality of life of the end of a lot of people's lives in those nursing homes growing up. And so I just, for me, it's like, all of those theories have to be really questioned, and I think we can start over again without it, because you really don't need them. Their usefulness has been waned out. And as I think, once, because this forces you to get into you. This is more, it's like when you really, because to really be able to do this, where people always talk about their intuition. Well, when you start practicing these lives, like the Mucusless diet or just the elevated lifestyle, you need to use some intellect first, because your intuition is clogged up and constipated, because you're craving things that you have no business eating. But as time goes on, you use the intellect that we have and understand detox process, understand those kind of things. Then you get to a point where now you can let go and allow the intuition to guide you, but that is a more, when you get to that is a more advanced thing. But to have a balance, and that's what I've always tried to do, is to be able to balance the intellect and the intuition in terms of the practice, because when it's balanced and you're really understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it on the brain side, but then you can also feel it on the intuitive side. Now you're getting somewhere. Now you can be really a successful practitioner on this path.
Yeah, I usually like to use the intellect and the intuition and the experience of myself or people around. So if you get into eating, how I eat and why I eat this, or I'm sure some people, they're in some intellectual echo chamber of the carnivore diet, for example.
Right.
I agree that I'm mainly in an echo chamber. I'm not so interested in listening to people I could maybe once, but into people who are in that system, and created a whole system around what a carnivore is awesome, because the three things would be: first, intellectually, there's a lot of things to me that make way more sense, from GI tract to our teeth to ancestors to many things. And then intuitively, there's something, okay, I see a fruit, I see a mango, I want to eat it. I see a rabbit, I don't really want to grab it, rip it off and eat it.
No, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And then the other thing I add is my experience. I've been feeling better, and I see the people around me who are thriving. And in general, like I'm more inspired by people who have that lifestyle. So that's a bit of a parenthesis, but I feel in a very polarizing world, which is the one of nutrition, this can there's no ultimate of one of the three, but these are keys to go to more towards what I feel is at least my truth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, some people call it a live it instead of a diet. Like, you got to live this thing. This is about life and lifestyle. And because when you live it, that shuts down all of the, like, so this is I'm actually been juice fasting for 15 days. And so some people think that I should be dead, but I'm not. I'm here, I worked out the other day, but that's just something that I've lived, and there's a handful of people that's seen it up close, so they get the benefit of being able to see it. But outside of that, people, again, that are stuck in those, as you say, the echo chambers, or just the one large echo chamber is that mainstream, all the propaganda that the meat and the dairy industries use to just shove protein down people's throats. Literally, just, you need all this protein, you need all of it, just the fear. And that's just standard marketing, where if you have a product, you want people to feel like they have to have it, like they need this. And so they come out with a lie saying, you need all of this stuff. So you need my cereal, you need my dead animal flesh that I'm selling, you need my B12 shot, you need my, and it creates this fear in people. And what frustrates me is that gets carried over into the plant-based world, where instead of just saying, okay, let's let go of all that, because those theories were based on meat eaters that felt like their diet was the greatest on the planet. They had this attitude. You go back to the 1800s, a lot of these guys, it was in Europe and over here in the United States, that created these theories. They thought that they didn't study other people's cultures and diets and have any kind of consideration of, well, what if you fast? What if you eat fruit? And the people that did that, like Professor Arnold Ehret, that was suppressed and they've attempted to write it out of history. And so, so for me, it's like, yeah, because what happens is people try to use, they'll try to come into something like the Mucusless diet, but they'll want to use those old nutritional concepts and say, like, okay, well, I got these calories and I did this, and but I'm doing the Mucusless diet. And it's like, at a certain point, that's going to hold you back. You're not going to be able to really dig into the practice, because you're worrying about things that don't have anything to do with real health.
Yeah, and in the mucusless diet, basically any disease is too much mucus, and it makes it simple in the way that, well, whatever you have, mainly the mucusless diet should work and help you, because and then science has created this whole super complicated system. When you have this, you need this. And even sometimes, actually, that's a conversation we can have, but even sometimes in the let's say in places that are closer to what we do. So if you take Dr. Morse, who's big on the raw food movement and all that, and amazing, great inspiration, but there's something I'm a bit skeptical about this specific herb for this specific organ, and there's like a whole body of science. While when I interviewed Doug Graham, something I like is the simplicity, where it's almost the I mean, you can transition obviously, but in general, it's mainly that's the right diet for where you're at, whether you're sick, whether your kidney works or not. It's a little bit less specific. Would you say with mucusless diet, would you say in general it's does it have a lot of those specificities of doing that food for that disease, or it's more the same for everything?
Well, it's more of a personal in experience, how much experience you get practicing the system to know what all of these different each food is a tool. And so part of your practice, especially when you're starting out, is to experience what all of these different foods do to your body. So if you have some sauteed cabbage in a big salad, how does that eliminate from your body versus if you have some steamed kale or some steamed collard greens with a big salad? Part of the principle is you're always going to have a big raw salad. So if you have a big raw salad with some kind of cooked or stewed or steamed vegetable or baked vegetable or sauteed vegetable or something like that, that would be an example of a principle. But all of these different things, as time progresses, you experience, what does it feel like to fast? What's a 24-hour fast feel like? What's 2-week-long fast? What's the difference if you feel when you're doing a water fast versus a dry fast? Like the mucusless diet artist that practices this system over time learns what all of those different things do. And so when you start to go through what Eric calls the latent illnesses, so these are illnesses that some of which maybe you were born with, some of which that haven't yet expressed themselves, or things that you ate into your body that has not yet expressed itself. And at some point down the road in the future, those ailments and the symptoms along with it would emerge. What the mucusless, one of the things that the mucusless diet does, and just this path, is it brings these ailments, these latent diseases, to us quicker so that we can actually get rid of them. Now, you got to know what to do when they come. You got to know, do you fast? What do you do when they come? Now, you mentioned Dr. Robert Morris, and when you're talking about chronic illness, and he used to say that a lot, because when I watched a lot of his videos back in the day when he had started his channel, and he was kind of clear, like, look, that his recommendations, like stuff he's talking about, are particularly for chronically ill people. That's what he's working with. And I found that when it's time to deal with endocrine system, if you got some seriously messed up adrenal glands, thyroid issues, the pineal gland, some of the organs, when those kinds of things, the herbs can be very helpful. And that's where that's where that comes in. But when I'm working with people that have like really chronic issues, I transition them first. So that's always part of the discussion, is we're going to start with the transition into the herbs as needed, as necessary, and work with it like that. Which, as opposed to what concerns me, is when people start looking at the herbs as basically trading the orientation that they have for medication over to the herbs, where that's the first thing that they're concerned about. The first thing they think about is like, okay, I'm sick. What herbs do I need to get? What formulas? And it's like, wrong. Work with the food. Like, I practice the mucusless diet without any herbs at all for 10 years, just a straight practice using the foods. Then I started to have some latent illnesses that were coming out, and that pushed me to like, okay, the fasting by itself isn't doing it. All that stuff. There's something else that can help with this process. And that's where, I started to really see the benefits of the herb. And the way that I look at it, just to break it down in just like the non-scientific type of just observation, is we know that certain things react to the body in various ways, just because of the biochemistry, the chemical reaction. So when people and I used to do, I had found this video that showed, like, when people smoke weed, marijuana, cannabis, goes into their lungs, and then there's a whole chemistry that takes place in terms of how the chemistry of that smoke is reacting with the lining of the lungs and the cells, and how that sends certain things, stuff up to the brain, messages to the brain, and causes, all the kind of stuff. That's an example of the change. Now the body is looking at it as a poison. It's reacting to it in a like, okay, this is a poison. What are you doing? In some cases, certain things that would be poisonous to a certain people or to a cleaner person, those things can have certain properties that essentially can help the detox process, or help the elimination process, or stimulate a gland. And I like what Dr. Morris said, the genetic remembering of cells, where essentially if you have a gland or an organ that's not functioning, it has to remember how to do its job. But it can't do that as long as there's a lot of the acid waste and inflammation, and you got all this mess and this stuff in the colon and intestines and stuff. It can't do that. And so I'm kind of in between in terms of, just my approach to dealing with the herbs, and when it is first and foremost, always work with the diet first, and fasting first. You got your colon irrigation, that's something that we do lemon juice and distilled water enemas, and that's something that we promote and practice that not everybody agrees with, but that's what we do. And I was gonna so I'll brace the audience. So I'm gonna unleash the mucus pictures so people know what we're talking about. This is the war on humanity. Like, this is what is running all of our countries, all of the world, all of the decisions that are being made by parasites, by pus and mucus, all this mucoid plaque, this black tar mess that smells like death. This is what we're talking about. So if somebody says, oh, enemas are unnatural, what's more unnatural, putting a little bit of water up your rear end to get this out, or to keep this in there until you start to damage your internal cells? And they like to call that cancer, or what, the damaged cells. What's more unnatural, to get this stuff out that's not supposed to be there anyway, or to help it out,
Okay, well, that's actually a segue into, I feel, the next conversation we're having, which is within that community of people who are mainly on fruit and mainly raw, then there is something with the detox. So if I could summarize it, is on one hand, if you're super simple, you think, well, I eat the right foods, and then I trust nature to take care of itself, and I don't want to be smarter than nature and do any kind of detox or even enemas, or I just in my fruits, for example. And then on the other side of it would be, well, we've lived in an environment with, I don't know, like I had vaccine when I was a child, so I probably have heavy metals, and also from the air and from eating pills of fluoride after I brush my teeth. That's what children do in France. And like a lot of the food and the pesticides, so many things, right? We've been poisoned. So because of that, well, it makes sense to go harder on the detox. And also, so that's a bit the two schools, and then there's a whole spectrum between it. I feel like sometimes I feel like, oh, I want to go more slow. Even with the mucoid plagues, there's a place also to think that maybe sometimes it's too soon to remove it, and that if you do a detox that removes it too early, I don't know, maybe it's better that it's done a little bit later and it's going too fast. I'm not sure. So where do you put that balance between pushing more the detox with maybe ideas from the mind rather than just letting the body do its thing?
So I call the Mucusless diet healing system the middle path. Is the dietary middle path in the plant-based world, because it's right down the middle. And you become, if you master the healing system, that means you become a master of the forms of eating that are mentioned in the book. You become a master of fasting. You become a master of using these various tools that we have at our disposal, from the colon irrigation and all this kind of stuff. And so what we always try to tell people is practice the system. And there's a number of people that have a trouble doing that because, one, their ego gets in the way, and other dogmas from other practices and other things get involved, where there'll be surprises like, wait a minute, it says that I'm not supposed to eat this, but I am allowed to eat that. And it goes against the raw foodist orthodoxy or some kind of vegan orthodoxy or something. And that's where I just encourage people to just, if you're going to do the Mucusless diet healing system, to really let yourself do it. Let yourself do the totality of the transition, and, don't try to think you're better than the transition. Once you get into the transition and you start the process of cleaning, you learn to read if you start to have some kinds of symptoms, you read them, and and that becomes part of your art of practicing, is to know, okay, am I going to fast? Do I need to start fasting and go through the elimination, go lay down, get on, as Arnold Ehret says, nature's operating table? Do I need to do that? Do I need to maybe just eat fruit? Do I need to just stay mucus free? Or do I need to eat some mucus? Do I need to slow this elimination down? So all of those different aspects are within the context of the Mucusless diet healing system, which really sets it apart, where it's not meant to be this straight line or some kind of, where a lot of people, they want to know, like, okay, how long does it take to be 100% mucus free? How long does it take to be to be clean? And, I get these questions all the time, and I'm saying, you're missing the point. The point isn't, I'm going to be 100% mucus free. I'm going to be 100% mucus free and raw. And I'm going to do, it's like, that's not the point. The point is taking your body and your physiology through a journey of transformation and cleansing that has to happen over time, and patience. In one of my videos, I'd say that one of the greatest virtues of practicing the Mucusless diet healing system is patience. You got to be patient. You got to have the kind of patience to just sort of sit back and you observe, contemplate, practice the system, and let it do its thing. But that's hard. That's hard for some people.
And to go more specifically on the things you do that to assist on top of the diet, one of the big thing for you, like the two I captured so far, would be fasting and enemas. Should we start with?
So fasting, enemas, sunbathing, and that's something that gets, of course, if you live someplace that doesn't have sun and good weather year round, you're limited there, but that's a really important aspect. So in terms of the ancillary therapies, you got your colon irrigation, lemon juice, and distilled water enemas is our choice of doing that. But colonics, see, I look at those as different tools, because that's another common question is, well, can I just do colonics instead? You can do colonics too, but it's a different tool. You would use the colonic differently than you would using lemon juice and distilled water enemas.
Different. It feels, how is that different? To me, colonic feels like, doing 10 enemas, but maybe I'm wrong.
So the big difference is most colonic places won't let you put lemon. If you have a home colonic system or something, or like a Kalima board, we got some people in the community that use Kalima boards and that kind of thing, then you're able to control what goes in there. The lemon, so when some of us that are more advanced practitioners, we use a lot of potent lemon. And when I make the lemon juice to go into my enema, I'm juicing the rind and all. So it's very, very potent. And I'll do 4, 5, 6 lemons with the rind and all of that juice plus some distilled water, heat that up like as hot as I can stand it, and put that in. You do that regularly, There's nothing that can touch that in terms of getting into, because the water alone can't get into the interstitial fluids. It doesn't have that pulling effect, where the lemon juice on the colon, the lining of the colon, the lining of the intestines, as far as up as it gets, it's pulling on the mucosa. You know, has this astringent property. It's like pulling, and you can feel that, and you can kind of feel this stuff coming out. And so most people, you know, that have this kind of stuff in there, this has to be loosened up and the toxicity neutralized. And that's really what that lemon is just a great deodorizer and a neutralizer of toxic waste. And so that's why we get people into doing those as soon as possible, because it makes the elimination process and the detox process way safer, because you want to get that stuff out, whatever's in the colon, whatever's in those intestines that's just sitting there, and those toxic waste, you want to get that stuff out. And then you can get the higher levels of detox, as long as that stuff's still sitting there. Or some people say, well, I eat really clean, but if you've never went through this kind of elimination, the lining of your colon and intestines could still be just wrapped around with all kinds of filth. And so that's another reason that people fall off the wagon, if they try to eat nothing but fruit. They're like, okay, I'm going to be fruitarian, and they feel good for a little while, but they've never really cleaned out their gut and their colon and their intestines. And at some point that fruit starts to break that stuff down. And if they don't know what they're doing in terms of like food combining to really keep this stuff brooming out, then then they start having some problems.
And to be specific, so you say colon and intestine. When I do an enema, does it go just in the colon, which is the same as a large intestine, right? And
so that's one of those things where people say, oh, the enema doesn't go up that far. The enema doesn't go up very far if you are constipated and you have 32 feet of impacted intestines. When you live like we're living, and you get to a point where you eat, and then a couple hours later you're having a bowel movement, and you're not walking around with uneliminated feces all the time. So that, and then you put fast, if you're that type of person, and then you fast and you do some lemon enemas while you're fasting, that goes way high. That goes way higher.
So first, is colon and large intestine is the same, right? Just for
the colon is that like the bottom, if you see back here on my painting, just that bottom part right there is so it's the inch, the out, that like the exit, it's that little, like the exit part of it.
Okay, and the large intestine is kind of the three parts that goes on the left, then horizontal, and then down, right? And so those, to me, it feels like the enema feels that large intestine, but not the small intestine. Is that correct?
So I've had so me and Brother Air both experienced this, just to put that to rest, where people say there's like a flap and the liquid can't go through. Now, I don't promote this. I'm not saying that this is the goal, but we've had the water come all the way up and out our mouth. When you're like months into a fast, and you've been doing this, and there's nothing except for, there's really nothing in you. And you do an enema, and there's like, I have a video where I break down all the how to, and in my book Spira Speaks, there's like how you actually do this. But you can invert your body, and some people do yoga poses and stand on their head and that kind of stuff. But when you get into that level, I've definitely had that experience where the liquid traveled all the way through the stomach and out through my mouth. And so just to dispel that myth.
How much water do you put in your bags? Like I usually do like 3 liters, which I think, I don't know how it is in US measurements.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, I'll do because I totally fill my bag up. Now, Brother Air does a little bit less liquid, but he likes to fill his bag up, or not fill it, but he'll kind of almost put half. He'll put half of the liquid into the bag or so. But he likes it to be, a lot of lemon juice, like a lot of lemon juice with just a little bit of water.
And when you say a bag, what quantity is that?
I think I think they're like maybe 2 liters. I think the standard enema bag. Yeah.
Okay.
And so now I had an enema bag that was a gallon that I used for a long time that I really liked, but I couldn't find it anymore. They stopped selling that particular one. But but to us, we look at it at like hygiene. Just you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you take some kind of shower or bathe in some way, and open up your pores of your skin, and a little bit of water and lemon juice just to irrigate the colon, irrigate the lower intestine, and just as a good hygienic thing to do.
Yeah, and by the way, for listeners, a gallon is 4.5 liters. So.
Yeah, so the standard size is about 1.75 quarts. So almost 2 quarts. It would be like the standard size.
Okay. Yeah, I've done for the first time the lemon enema like a week ago, actually. Because before I felt, that might seem a bit harsh, so I don't know. And when I tried it, it was like really, really instantaneous. I couldn't really keep the water for long at all. Actually, I couldn't do what usually I do 2 bags of almost 1.5 liters. So that's the 3 liter.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to almost separate in 2 because it would like straight away, maybe because it activates more, removes more.
It's like, that's why we say it's the real deal, and to do like what I did today. So I juiced four big lemons with the rind and all. So it's like I got lemon rind juice. Now put that in that I haven't eaten for 15 days. And so I put that with the water, fill it up, and I can hold that for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, just hold it and then release. Now, most people couldn't do that because they didn't do, a lot of people can't even get half of that liquid in, they without, this is, so I don't recommend people do. I'm just saying that as an example of where this can go if you, if you're practicing like that. But you can't do that when you have as long as there's old toxic kind of stuff that's on the lining of your intestines, you got uneliminated feces stones, or you have parasites or whatever that's in there, as long as that stuff is in there, your enemas are uncomfortable. You're not going to feel good. And so once you get rid of that stuff, all of a sudden you start feeling good. You're like, oh, okay, this is why they're so excited about enemas. This isn't as bad as I thought, but you got to kind of go through the valley of the shadow of death before you get to that sometimes, and that's where you start where people find out how clean or filthy they are. If they think like, man, I'm pretty clean, and then you start, doing some enemas, doing some of these kind of transitional practices. We just had a thing we did, Kyrene, member of the Mucus Free community, had put together a 7-day mucus free challenge. And so that's no fats, no starch, obviously no pus, just 100% mucus free, which there's very few raw foodists that are 100% mucus free, because most of them are eating avocados or eating the nuts and the seeds, all that kind of stuff, which is fine for transitional purposes. But what people find out when they eat 100% mucus free, they remove the fats, they remove all the oils, all the avocados, all the nuts, all the seeds, anything starchy, and they just deal with mucus free, including cooked, with as much cooked as they want. If it's mucus free, they realize, wow, this is actually very hard. This is harder than being raw. to be 100% mucus free, eating all the cooked that I want along with the raw, this is hard. Like this is harder, and people start to, and then they start going through detox symptoms and everything that they thought they were past. You know, they thought like, man, I've been raw for however many years and I'm pretty clean. And then it's like, okay, be mucus free, but you're allowed to eat cooked mucus free food. And then they quickly see like, oh, okay, we see what you're talking about. This is a whole different thing.
That's interesting because you know when you said where you came from, it was actually a motivation to eat more clean. Well, almost here living in Ubud, Bali, there's a whole culture around raw food and raw restaurants. But then it's like dehydrated papaya on a flaxseed cracker with the vegan pesto. And it's like, yeah, that meal's all raw, but it's mainly fat. It's a lot of oils. It's a lot of nuts and seeds. It's a lot of very complex food combining.
Right.
So it's kind of raw, but it's not raw like you'd find that in the forest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just raw. Because when we do raw, because some of us, it'll be a level of practice to do. We call it, raw mucus free. If you be 100% raw and mucus free. Well, now you're talking about ripe mangoes, pineapple, your apples, berries, you're talking about just fruit. And then if you have some vegetables, some cucumber or a combination salad, just 100% mucus free. And raw is very hard to do for most people because now there's no fat involved at all. And so most people's palates aren't at that stage yet,
And so going back to the enema, I had another question. I know, so I'm in Bali and people experiment all kind of things here. And some do enemas with aged urine. Have you ever come across that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people talk about it, and there's folks that are into the urine practices that sometimes get attracted to the mucusless diet in our community, but we're not in favor at all of the urine of the urine practices. We've I know what they say, and I've heard the arguments and that kind of stuff, but if you're practicing a mucusless diet, and Eric points it out, like, look, when your kidneys are filtering properly and you're actually detoxing properly, your urine should be nasty. Your urine should not be coming out to like, because you had mucus in it. There should be clouds, and maybe some of them say that the clouds of mucus is healthy or that it's good, but I'm like, nah.
So actually I wanted to ask you something more personally, because a few months ago, like, because I mainly eat fruits, and like my pee is very clear. I've actually even tried urine therapy. I've posted, but I actually even tastes pretty nice, and it's super clear when you're mainly on fruits and coconut water and all that. But a few months ago, before I even tried that, I was checking my pee without drinking it. I was generally like really, really clear. And so I went to a friend who's been studying with Dr. Morse, and he told me, oh, your kidneys aren't detoxing, aren't filtering. And that's why. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to start that. At the same time, so one night I was at a retreat, and the food was fish and rice. So it was like emotionally challenging. So I was like, fuck it, I'll have the fish and rice, and anyway, I'll see how it feels, and I'll see how it looks like. And so the next day my pee was gross, like it was super. So my conclusion from it is, well, my kidneys are probably detoxing, because when I eat nasty, it comes with this stuff.
I mean, the trick is to get it to where you can have those kinds of urinations, and you've been fasting for days, and you've been eating, because now your kidney, so it's a lot easier for the kidneys to do that when when you eat something that's deplorable, and you put something in it's like, you're there, if they function at all, that does because when it takes a higher level of function for it to filter when you're eating cleaner, when you're eating the cleaner stuff.
they're good enough that they'll clean when I go really nasty.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
not that fine-tuned that they keep cleaning when it's already quite clean, kind of. They
yeah,
don't do that
yeah.
next level of detox.
Right. And but that's one of the elements that I like about the transitional nature and methodology of the mucusless diet is that you have plateau points where you find something that works and you're just sort of in that space, but you don't stay there too long without doing a 24-hour 48-hour fast, or without maybe going a few days eating nothing but fruit. Then you go back and you go back to eating, so you're constantly experiencing for a short period of time those higher levels, but you don't feel compelled to stay there forever. Like, I'm gonna do this really long fast, I'm gonna do this long. It's like, no, just do a 24-hour fast. Some people do it once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever, get their 48-hour or just whatever, just hitting the reset button in the body. And every time you do that, you should notice that your kidneys will improve every cycle, like every time, because you're almost retraining them, and they'll continually start to improve.
Interesting. Okay, and then I have a few other questions on other detox modalities, and a few things I hear people do around here. One would be MMS, one would be turpentine, one would be also the like puddings with bentonine clay and get the mucoid plaques out. Maybe you have others in mind, but what do you think of, let's say, at least the three kinds of detox that, on one hand, I've experienced some of them can really help and push things, but can feel a bit aggressive also sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not a fan of like the turpentine thing. I don't have with the MMS, I don't have a lot of case studies of that, but in general, because we're just not fans of supplements and that kind of thing. The farthest over we get is really with the herbology, which if you want to, you can go and get the herbs yourself if you're in a place that has them. And if you want to just be real hardcore and natural and just go find them yourself, but it's hard to get all of the different herbs you need, and depending on where you live, and there is a potency that comes sometimes from the process of tincturizing, if I'm gonna invent a word, but making them into tinctures and that kind of thing. But as far as definitely not the turpentine. And I know some people that practice the mucusless diet now that talked about they had went through those phases and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'd put like the coffee enema in that. I don't recommend coffee enemas. What was the other one you mentioned?
The pudding, like the bentonine clay.
Oh yeah, I'm not a fan of that, but there are some elder members of the mucusless diet that practice that or that recommend that and work with people with that. I've done a little bit, I experimented with that mostly with Dr. Morris's GI broom formula, which has bentonite clay in it, and I think it might have a little charcoal or something in there. So so I'm not as negative to that, but the way people use them, generally don't like. Again, I like when if you really need that. So if you have a certain level of toxicity, maybe you did a lot of hard drugs or something in your life before you started this transformation, or you ate some really toxic stuff, or you were you had some where you're really, really toxic and you can feel it in your gut, then some of the clays and that kind of stuff, GI broom kind of things could be helpful to. But there's always there's always another option that I like to try first, where I'd rather see somebody do green juice with a whole lot of cilantro, drink that every day, and along with lemon juice and distilled water enemas. Juicing, I'm a big proponent and fan of juicing. I know some people aren't. not into the
Yeah.
juicing, but I would rather see people kind of go in that direction.
And the last thing I'll share, because I know some of my listeners are from Bali, there's something called Zen cleanse, which is meant to remove also mucoid plaques, and they have another one for gallbladder stones. But with both of them, I got results, but I'm always skeptical that maybe what went out was actually what I put in.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that I tell people, as far as like when I was getting a lot of this stuff out, I was not, all I was putting in my body was fresh juice and doing lemon juice enemas, and so nothing I was putting in resembled any of this. Now, when you start getting into the clays and that kind of stuff, then then that's going to be mixed with whatever is in there. And if you get into the psyllium or stuff to try to push it out, and it's like, yeah, you can, and there's things that can help eliminate stuff here and there, but is it, in the long run, is that the best way to do it? Is that the best kind of thing? And for me, I like to get people to focus on the diet first. Learning to use the diet to have those kinds of eliminations. The diet combined with the few things that we mentioned with the, as far as the enemas and that kind of stuff, but you can pretty much use those couple tools and, go really, really far without a lot of, other things that are aggressive or kind of, I was gonna say unnatural. You're just kind of just different. Like I said, those are tools, and there are definitely cases where those tools can be helpful, but they should definitely be, there needs to be a reason other than just like a basic, like, oh, everybody should just do this. Like, nah, we need a reason for that.
Yeah, what I've been feeling also sometimes is it can be also even a community feeling, like doing a detox with friends, or it can be an ego thing of wanting to go faster or knowing something that other people don't. So, I mean, I vibe with doing some, but being like just checking in on that. I'd love to go on the juice fasting also. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. How are you with time?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. So with juicing, I've had like there's something in me that's like, okay, let's do more natural. That's like the intuitive. I mean, the tropical area, I eat ripe fruits, maybe sometimes a little bit of leaves and just vegetables or an herb. And in that context, I wouldn't be juicing. So there's something that feels a bit unnatural in a way for me with juicing when I think this way. And the other thing is, I've heard people who've had problems with their teeth, for example, doing a lot of orange juice and getting their teeth more black, or even like teeth falling from not chewing, this kind of thing. So how do you feel about juice fasting in general, and how do you feel about this little concern I have?
Well, so in general, yeah, I'm a huge fan of juice fasting. And the liquid fast is the general recommendation that Arnold Ehret recommend, because he didn't recommend water fasting, and I know some people that's what they really recommend. But Ehret, because of the condition of humans, was saying that we're a little too filthy to really be trying to mess with water fasting or even dry fasting. The usefulness of whether if you want to do something more aggressive than just lemon juice alone or lemon water would be, but you're still putting something in that's just going to help to kind of loosen and neutralize anything that might be in your circulation, because stuff starts getting dumped into our circulation in the detox process. But yeah, no, I'm a fan of juice, but now fruit, to me, there is a difference between fruit juice fasting, where you're just 100% on fruit juice, versus when you start to incorporate vegetable juices and other broths and different things like that. So I'm a fan of that. In terms of where people,
those fan of on fruits or incorporating a lot of vegetables also in broth.
What's that?
Well, you're more a fan of the fruit juice?
Yeah, I'm yeah, in terms of because for me, when I start getting into like vegetable juices, sometimes that doesn't really feel like a fast anymore, just in my body. It's just like, okay, this is easy, but the fruit juice that's a certain level, that fruit juice to me, is a very, there's a pretty wide gap between when you're just, fruit juice only, and then you start to incorporate the green juice. That doesn't mean that can't be a part of the same fasting period where you go several days 100% fruit juice, and then you have a day where maybe you have some fruit juice in the morning and a vegetable juice in the evening or something like that. So we're not real strict in terms of, okay, if you're doing one thing, you got to do that. It's like, no, it's part of a continuum of tools and experiences as you move along. But definitely the fruit juice fasting is at a higher level. Now, when you're talking about things like teeth issues, first and foremost, you always got to look at what the person was eating before they got into the diet. There's a lot of people who, because there's the lymphatic system, as it moves the acids and things all around the gums and down here, and we got the lymph nodes. And with people that have very stagnant lymph, these acids just sit here. And then if they have bad oral hygiene to begin with, or just damage, or if they took things like I did when I was young, I took medications that the penicillin and all these different things that destroyed the enamel in my teeth at a young age. So by the time most people get to practice in the Mucusless diet, a lot of the damage has been done to their teeth. And so then they'll want to try to blame the fruit or the juicing on why they're having teeth problems. And I wrote a whole article about this that in response to, there was an article by Stanley Bass where he talked about how the Mucusless diet didn't work, but he had tried to eat nothing but fruit for 2 years and all his teeth fell out. Was like, well, you're not practicing the Mucusless diet healing system because no one told you to do that. No one told you to eat nothing but fruit for 2 years. You're not using the transition methodology. And yeah, if it becomes an elimination and that's why we say, like, we have to we got to be real with ourselves on how filthy we are as a species, and then as an individual.
Why did that happen to him? It's because he went too fast.
Yeah. Zero transition. He just said, oh, okay, humans are fruitarian, so I'm just gonna eat nothing but fruit. And he needed a transition, and he didn't practice the system at all. So it's like, well, what book did you read? But that's what a lot of people do. They skip over the transition methodologies, and there's 3 lessons, the transition diet lessons, and they focus on the fasting. They focus on the philosophy, which is that the human species is a frugivorous species. Now, the fact that we are a frugivorous species that are supposed to eat fruit, and what it takes to transition back to that after having had generations and generations of people not doing that, that's what people don't understand. And they miss that gap of what kind of work does it take to transition and transform and transmute your body back to that state to where you can easily exist on nothing but fruit, where that is 100% natural, where it's like, where you're not even thinking about it. It was like, yeah, I'm eating, all I had today was mangoes. What's the big deal like that? But most people, it's going to take a long time to get to that. They have to go deep into their physiology and really have some profound transformation to get to that space where the fruit, where being, fruitarian or eating nothing but fruit for long periods of time is going to be 100% like natural feeling like that. And so you can do it for a while, but then what most people at some point, certain cravings start coming up, and that's where folks run into those problems where if they didn't transition and all of a sudden out of nowhere, they'll get a craving for something like fish or for something. And even if, I don't know if you've heard that Dr. Morris tell that story, but that's one of his stories, that book, because it was happened before he practiced before he read the Mucusless Diet Healing System book. He was traveling and he had just did like, I think it was something, he did a long fast, or he had just did nothing, ate nothing but fruit for like 2 years. And something compelled him to go eat some fish, and it nearly killed him because he had went way too long eating properly, and that totally made him sick. And but he fasted on orange juice, and he brought himself back. That wouldn't have happened if he would have, like I said, he gets a pass because he hadn't read the Mucusless diet book at that point. He had just read some kind of fruitarian literature. But that wouldn't happen if he'd have transitioned and really like dedicated himself to the transition, slowed things down, and then got to a point where he was eating nothing but fruit for long periods of time. Then you're incapable of craving that. It's like there's no way on earth that I will ever crave bleach. Like I don't want to drink bleach, but there's also no way in the world that I will ever crave something like fish again. Because they're the same, there's like they're just not food at all. It's like I don't crave wood. I don't want to eat wood or bark. Like I want to eat fruits and vegetables. And so, but that kind of transformation, it can't just be a mental thing. You can't just know what humans are supposed to eat. You have to physically transform your body and do so over time. To make it impossible to go back to these ways of eating that we're not supposed to do.
And what you shared with Dr. Morse makes me think of a little experiment in a book you've probably read, Man's Higher Consciousness by Hilton Otema.
Yeah.
And he puts an animal in in a sealed room or cage, and it's like if you diminish the supply of air little by little and make the air worse and worse, that animal survives because it adapts. But if you put the same animal straight into the lower quality air, then they die straight away. And so there's something in our, you talked about the revolution of fast food, which is more the devolution of fast food. And talk about this that devolution, and in that view, we've adapted to some things, which makes there's also the burden of being more clean, which is we become really more sensitive to certain environment.
Where we got more. And I really like that kind of what you're talking about is where Hotima terms it the law of vital adjustment, where the human organism has a capacity to adjust to some of the most bizarre behaviors to hopefully live through. And so that's what we've done, is we've adjusted to, and some people have adjusted better than others. But that's not necessarily a good thing, because in our society, people think that it's a good, and we have things like and that's what I think about when I see food eating contests. They have the hot dog eating contests and all these different TV shows where people stuff themselves with food. And these are examples of the law of vital adjustment. The body is trying its best to keep that organism alive despite this horrible behavior. And even if they manage to not die, to live however long they live and whatever the degenerate disease that they end up experiencing eventually in the end, you can imagine what is that doing when they pass that down to their offspring and their children. What kind of disease? Because when we see that, because there should be no baby that is born with a disease, but it happens every day. Why? Constipation, not just bowel constipation, but cellular constipation. That the mother and father have. If you have a child and you have defiled yourself and put so much obstruction involved, now you're complicating the birthing process. And so we have this epidemic of young people that have any number of different diseases, ailments, and side effects. Then of course they go and they get, they go and get whatever medicines and all that kind of stuff that makes things even worse. But But that's what we're dealing with. And so it's like, just because our bodies have adapted, because this is whatever people always like to say, well, why can we eat meat? We don't just die over. It's like, that's not the point. The body is an air gas engine at the end of the day. After we get through all of our vegetables and our fruits and all this kind of stuff, we know that we can go days without eating, but we can't go 5 minutes or 10 minutes without air. And so air is everything in our reality, but most people don't even think about it. But that's the foundation, is breathing, the air, your air gas engines, first and foremost. And once you get a grasp of that, then all of these other things are just tools. The fruit is a tool to help us clean our bodies. The vegetables are tools to help us clean the body. These things that we eat, even if we eat some mucus lean or something, and if it's slowing down an elimination, we're still want to be trying to eat things and eat more cleansing food than obstructing food.
Well, let's get into air. And as we're talking about man's higher consciousness, you said we're a frugivorous species, but even in that book, he thinks ultimately we're more breatharian species. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and and we try to not talk a lot about that, just because you lose a lot of people. Then you get some people that they'll hear that, and then that's another thing that leads them to not transition. And they'll say, well, if we're breatharian, then why can't we let's just stop eating today and just live without,
to me that's how I see the transition diet is like transitioning towards the fruits and a bit of herbs. But like, even if that takes 10 or 20 years, what I see now in my current consciousness is that then it keeps traveling more and
going.
more.
Yeah, it's an infinite journey, and there's always a higher level to get to, which is why I call this an art form. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics of an art form, is you're never finished. The best artists are always trying to get better, trying to get to the next level. And with physiology as an art form, there's always another level to get to. You can always get a little bit cleaner.
With friends, we push it also. Sometimes when you're like in samadhi and you kind of stop breathing, whether it's meditation or with the assistance of plants, or then sometimes we have that vision that you could also like go into like just pure, even non-breathing, which would be
yeah. I mean, that's because oxygen is high up, is not the most refined element. It's like, what if there was a being that just breathed hydrogen, or a being that really was a light being that didn't breathe at all, that transmuted into light and existed as light particles. I mean, there's, you can get into, you usually lose everybody you start talking like that. So I tend to, I used to get into a lot of that kind of stuff back in the day, and then I just noticed it was I was losing too many people. Start talking about people that live on the sun, and talking about like the black hole, human as a black hole, and the kind of that radioactivity. If you transmute we got all this iron in our blood, there's iron in the sun too. What happens if we transmute our blood to the point where it's radioactive, to the point where, and we see this in some of the old texts, and even in the Bible, the story of beings that are that emanate flame, that emanate heat. And there's that the one story where they call it God, but whatever you want to believe this entity was, but it was facing a different direction. And Moses is like, why don't you turn around and face us so we can see you? And then the entity said, you would burn up. You couldn't handle me. That now we're talking about skin. If you could transform your skin so that it's literally radioactive, that the iron in your blood is radioactive, this transmutation process. Now we're talking, like that's that's the breatharians I want to meet, or those breatharians, the ones that are I gotta stand 50 feet away from because they're so, they'll burn you up if you get too close to them.
Do you know people who are claim to be breatharians?
I mean, I know people that claim to be, but I don't know. I generally I don't know. I just kind of let them do their thing, and I watch. Generally, me and Brother Air kind of look at it like, if in general, you're probably not going to see like the hardcore breatharians that would be someplace on this planet somewhere, or they're probably not gonna be on YouTube and be on Facebook and be on, social media kind of talking about, they're gonna be someplace just emanating just into that reality. But
Maybe Tom Elamin, right? He's quite present on social media.
Yeah, I met him. He came to one of our events. We had a Era Day celebration, I think the second annual. Yeah, he had came to that. Yeah, so I got a chance to meet him.
Nice. And I acknowledge, I think it's cool to see that you can go into those conversations a bit more out there, let's say, and at the same time, you're on your dharma, like sometimes it's good to stop and not go too far, so you can still resonate with people and be that bridge. So I get that.
Yeah. I mean, that's something because I've had friends that kind of lived out there where the average person couldn't really talk to them at all. They like you would, they're just way, they kind of stayed out in that realm, and I love talking to them and getting into that. But yeah, the average person, you just lose. Yeah. You just kind of lose a lot of people. And so as an educator, when it became clear that was my calling and something that I was supposed to do, then that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on sharing the things that I know that people need. Like, what do they need? They need transitional education, because there's so few people talking about that. If there was a lot of people that already taught transitional methodology, and that was just sort of a common point of discussion within these communities, then I would either talk about something else, or I would do what I originally was going to do, which would be a musician and play music all day. And that would be it. But when I looked out into the world, and I'm seeing that there's this huge lacuna, to use an academia term, this huge missing thing, element in people's studies and diet and understanding, then I was just like, I gotta, someone has to share this information in this perspective, because there's a lot of people that are falling off the wagon, as we're talking about the folks that practice something for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and then go all the way back, or maybe they're working with like Dr. Morris methodologies and eat nothing but fruit for 2 months, and then the herbs are hard, and they might heal themselves, but then they go all the way back to eating the same foods that put them in that position in the first place. And so that's where I'm saying, well, look, here's a down the middle methodology that allows you to eat mucus forming foods, but when you need to, and it just puts it all together so that there is no falling all the way back. You can just keep moving forward.
Yeah, and that's cool. You also have a different style, I mean, I think that's like, there's a lot of purpose in what you're doing overall, plus like from, ethnically also, where you're coming from, maybe you resonate more with like the Black American population. But then even someone like me, sometimes I feel like you get that swag, that's a little bit like the traditional doctor, or like even
right.
I would love to listen to, but sometimes like, oh, you know what, I want to listen to Professor Spira.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, this podcast is called the Lightleaders, so it's also, just by its name, you can see that we can touch topics that are a little bit less mainstream, let's say.
Right.
Like breatharianism, and that's why I ask about urine, and because I know the people who listen, they're actually quite interested and open to these topics. We've been going for like an hour 40 already, so I know it's gonna get a little bit late. So let's take maybe 10-15 minutes to finish. There's especially one question I was interested in is so if I take the mucusless diet system, it's something a little bit controversial, but it's been a topic that's been coming with my friends and some of my sisters here in Bali who are more on the raw foods and fasting. And it was in the motherhood and eugenics. It's so I'll share. Motherhood with mucusless diet before, during, and after pregnancy is the development towards the Madonna-like holy purity, principally different from the dangerous so-called ordinary childbirth, with its ever-present risk of life known in our present civilization. If the female body is perfectly clean through this diet, the menstruation disappears. In scripture, it is called by the significant word purification, which it in fact is clean, no longer polluted by the monthly flow of impure blood and other waste. This is the ideal conception of an inside purity capable of the immaculate conception. When seen in the light of this truth, the entire Madonna mystery is easily understood. So that's obviously really controversial, especially in the spiritual community, conscious communities. I mean, because there's a whole culture in the sisterhood of getting back in touch with themselves and their menstruation and learning to love their menstruation, which is which is beautiful in a society where maybe there's been shame around it. So it's amazing that people get back in touch with that. So at the same time, it gets really controversial when we have discussions around it, because I can feel, especially with two men talking about it. I've remembered when I started looking into this, I got some women getting quite triggered, right? And be like, oh, well, yeah. And so, yeah, it was interesting that Eret says that. And also, have you read a book called Return to the Brain of Eden?
Yeah.
And in this, it's a more scientific approach where they postulate that ovulation in the past, in the 600,000 to 200,000, when we were thriving before the devolution and when we were eating many fruit, ovulation came with orgasm, actually, and not in that cycle. So as we were talking about things that are a little bit on that side, I know it's controversial, so I don't know how comfortable you are about talking about it, but what do you think of that part of Eret saying pretty clearly?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll talk about any all of those topics, you know, because I know that because few people ask about it, so I get excited when people ask about some of these more controversial things, just because they're like, I don't know, people either are scared to talk about it or kind of skip over it. But so again, here we have the idealism, like how far this can be taken. And when it says, you know, menstruation, well, first it's going to be the symptoms. And that's something that a number of practitioners of the mucusless diet, women and some elder women that have practiced for years and years, can attest to there being like night and day in terms of how heavy the menstruation is, the symptoms of it, and how when they're eating cleaner, when they're fasting, when they're practicing the system and they're doing enemas and Takora, Sister Takora, one of the who's practiced the mucusless diet like 40-50 years or something like that. She was talking about, you know, douching with lemon juice, not only doing the lemon juice enemas, but lemon juice douching, and just a total cleanse. You know, that I've heard so many of those stories, and I've worked with a number of women that had really just painful, because to me, it comes down to, do you want to have really painful eliminations during your cycle, or is it more natural to not have the pain, you know, to not have to have the cramping and the suffering every time? And if it was possible to experience that by cleaning your diet up, wouldn't that be better?
And just, to pose you there, there's kind of two things, and I want to understand. So when Eret talks about the menstruation disappears, is it the bleeding or the cycle?
So that's a good question.
You can have
because
the cycle, menstruation cycle without
right. You can have the cycle without any without any symptoms. The cycle could extend, and so I've literally seen both. And this is one of the areas where the research is taking place right now, with all the women that are getting into practicing the Mucusless diet now, with Sister Decorah that's done it for years and years. These are the kinds of things that we're exploring now, because you read Rational Fasting and you see the story of Teresa Mitchell, who said that she got it down to the point where she menstruated every 6 months. Well, that would be a question. So, okay, is your cycle really, is it a 6 month long cycle now? Or if for whatever reason, did you not feel the elimination or experience the side effects it just once out of the 12 months? Those are definitely questions that are actually still up for finding out for the pioneering women that go down this path.
That's interesting. And so it's almost from what I've read and seen, and obviously like women will have the experience, and I'll be interviewing more women on that, but I almost feel like it's like going from heavy menstruation, and then when you're more clean, having less blood, and that's only a theory, right, from what I've read, but maybe even then going to only, as the book Return to the Brain of Eden says, then losing the cycle part and ovulating with deep orgasm. And then when I read that, I thought, well, then maybe women would do what men currently do, which is, so as a man, we release our seed when we have an ejaculation, right? But the tantric Taoist, what we like to do, because we don't want a child each time and we want to make love for longer, is we actually learn then to even decouple. So maybe even women then ovulate when they have orgasm, and then you'd have books to train to not ovulate and still have a full body orgasm.
Well, I mean, that whole, I mean, and that, those are things that, that we have to find out as we clean ourselves up, as we go back to that, as we say, the Edenic life and the Edenic lifestyle, and but the kind of cleansing, the level and how long that really takes, that's the factor, because, that's where we have to start talking generationally, where if you have two people that have a child, and you bring that child up on the Mucusless diet, and that child gets with somebody else that practices the diet that's also was raised on the diet, like if you get a couple generations down there, you're talking about a whole different level of human that would not understand disease as we know it today.
Well, let's go on the men too, because I was listening to an interview of Dr. Sebi, and who was talking also, actually that was when I was looking into that menstruation, but there's also a part on the book Return to the Brain of Eden on the men, and when we were more on fruits, we would last way longer actually, because we had less of the steroids and the testosterone. But Dr. Sebi, he said men's sperm should be green. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of that one. I don't know if I would agree with that, but
okay, that's the end of my random at the I mean, the last one would be when you talked about generation. I was thinking that's the most likely, is that we need to make babies that are raised on, and then we go back to there. But there's still, I mean, we're immortal anyway, but like in that mind-body complex, I always have the desire to stay in there as long as possible. So it's all okay, but I always have that desire that maybe, like if I'm clean now, then by the time I reach 60, 70, I get to the next level of being clean, and then you can extend and go back to, if you believe it, the times when we were living hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, and that's something that Brother Air definitely likes to talk about all the time is immortality. And for him, that's everything. You know, that to get to that, to get clean enough to that level where the human air gas engine with perpetual motion air gas engine doesn't wear out, doesn't lose its elasticity, and therefore doesn't pass away, doesn't die, doesn't need to be reborn and replicated. You know, that's you know, that's definitely something where, you know, my take on that was to talk generationally, where, because there's a lot of people that they want to do that for their body. It's like, look, we're gonna go as far as we can, you know, but we've had so much collateral damage, and we got like, you know, you look at how we used to eat, and it wasn't that long ago when we were eating that way, and how far against nature that is. Like we have a lot of work to do. But when you start talking about our children and our children's children, and when we start to make efforts putting together, like we want to put together an arid village of, you know, a group of people where we live together like this, you know. And of course, I know there's places around the world where people have similar things, or they've tried to do similar things. There's not really anybody that's living Mucusless diet healing system specifically like that. But when we start to have numerous of these villages, of these you know, communities that practice this lifestyle, and you know, that's when we're going to see the real change in humanity. You know, it's not going to happen at the ballot box and voting for whatever you want. It's going to be changing your physiology. We say this is the most revolutionary thing that you can do, is to learn how to control what you put into your body and to transform your physiology.
Cool. Yeah, my last little topic would be about that and community. So actually here I live in Bali, where we have some land where we starting to, like, obviously it's a very polarizing topic. So we mainly go raw, and we mainly encourage fruits, and we'll see if we go more on rules or not. But yeah, I feel like there's more and more light leaders around the world who want to build community, come back to nature. Is that part of your plan too?
Yeah, and we have a research and development team that, because over the years I've wanted to put something together that would have people, and that's just, we get together and we work on all kinds of different topics and things, and research and analysis, and you know, just all kinds of stuff. And one of the books that was brought to the table by one of the members, Vadim Voss, was a book, the things that money can't buy, which gets into resource-based economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
don't believe so much in money, or at least just barter currency.
Well, it's a transition. So it's not the old kind of like the hippie, where they would talk, you know, from the 60s or something, or that, where it's like, we're getting rid of all money, and it's just all about love, and we're just gonna grow our food and just love everything. It's like, no, this, you know, our plan is different, because we've seen how that hasn't worked in the past, why it hasn't worked, and we'll improve on that. But you know, the resource-based economy, it's not scared of technology. It actually, it understands, you know, where we can use technology for our benefit that doesn't hurt the earth and helps us cleanse. And essentially, that's where, like, an enema bag or a colonic is a technology, is some of the best technology to help. But you know, when you really understand and value resources, so obtaining the land, being able to then work the land, grow the land, do what you live, how you want to live on the land, you know, all those kind of things. It's definitely a game changer. And especially when you're transforming physiology on that. And when that is a goal, and everybody is there, and that's what they're about, is transforming their physiology and cleaning things up. And, you know, now you're talking about creating a blueprint that other people all over the world can look at and follow, if you choose to share it, you know, if it's shared. And so those are the kinds of things, you know, we have some plans in place, and they're long-term plans. And you know, we're working on that. But and really the activities of the past couple years have actually pushed us to work on it quicker, because I'm not in a rush generally in things. Like I see things way in the future, and I like to transition to it. I just love transition on all levels. And so, because what happens is, because I've seen, as we talk about the like the fruitarians that fall off, there's a whole lot of communes that were supposed to be raw foodist or fruitarian or be vegan or whatever, that went to Costa Rica or went to wherever, and that fell apart. That they were there and everything was great, and we're, you know, and then all of a sudden it fell apart. We don't want that to happen. You know, when we put something together, we want to make sure that it's gonna stand the test of time. And so, you know, to put together and for me, the key is a transitional, in the same way that we talk about transition with with food in the body, transition in terms of, you know, in an economic, you know, economic culture.
What do you mean? As you were talking, I was thinking, oh, there's a transition diet for, so if you take economy, okay, so now we use fiat currency like dollars and all that. Then,
Right.
like I'm really into cryptos, right? Because at least it's less centralized. But you can still buy cryptos with dollars, so you can still sell weapons and be rich in Bitcoin, you know? So then we have the barter currency where you can't buy in with dollars. You can only, there's still a currency, but it's only in the ecosystem doing things.
Right.
And then you go towards like what the sages do, which is karma is your currency. You just give, and you know, but if you go straight to the karma,
right,
then like a bridge, like people don't believe it doesn't work. It's like bypassing, you know? And
exactly. And that's something we just, who I mentioned earlier, Vadim Voss, he's a cryptocurrency expert. He got me into it, and a bunch of us in the community. He kind of brought that to the community, in the decentralized finance, and, you know, becoming a liquidity provider and that kind of stuff. Just go on past all the stuff and get right into the good stuff. And so, yeah, we had just did we just did 2 webinars where he had put together a course, and to get into decentralized finance, just like a how-to to just get right up in there. But and I love that, you know, because one of my core principles to life is freedom. You know, when people ask, like, what's your core principle? So mine is freedom, number 1, peace, number 2, but freedom is a hard number 1, because I will give up some peace to live free. And so I love that about the decentralized finance and the crypto movement and revolution that's happening right now, the decentralized, you know, kind of thing, because we need a lot more of that. And so it's exciting to see that happening right now.
Yeah, that's exciting. And yeah, then you can translate it to many things. Like, do we do our own internet and phones, or do we go straight to telepathy? Well, maybe we need the bridge of
probably need our own internet and phones first. We get our own
like electric drones or something, or do we work on teleportation? Well, maybe, you know, maybe we're not.
I mean, it's like, because what we have to understand now, because what some people traditionally in our circles have tended to not want to do is take seriously the threat of filthy pus and mucus eaters that are totally morally compromised. They're mentally compromised. And so there are plenty of peaceful native peoples that didn't matter how peaceful they were, didn't matter how remote they were away from society. If the crazy folks found them, they wiped them off the planet in a lot of cases. And so we have to look at that from the historical perspective. Okay, we can't just go off somewhere and not have some kind of protection and think that we're going to be okay, because folks show up that want what we have, and we don't have a way to protect ourselves and protect what we have. Then they're going to decimate us, just like they decimated Native Americans in North America and Central America and South America in Africa and so on and so forth. And so that's something that would be kind of new that we would be bringing to the table to say, okay, we don't have a, I don't have a problem protecting ourselves, and that's, and that is an act of self-love, to protect to protect oneself and one's environment is is something that is important.
Cool. Thanks. I mean, we've been going for 2 hours, but maybe we'll have another one, but like for now, it's quite a lot, and I'm happy we could go a bit into those fun topics, also a bit maybe beyond what you're usually talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the kind of stuff we usually talk about in private. Some of the things like these are when we're in the private or the smaller, mucus-free groups or the meetups and that kind of stuff. This is just the more, those more advanced kind of discussions that are generally you need to, because it's like to have those discussions. I mean, and I love having them, but in order to do that, you have to have people that have read the book, read, through Mucusless diets, all of Eric's work, Man's Higher Consciousness, just sort of the books that are in the canon. And you read enough of those and you can have that level of discussion. But, most people, don't get to that because they get stuck in the dogma of whatever it is they first got into, and they just sort of stay there. And they're not really saying, they haven't processed things to where they're saying things that are original. They're just saying things they read, and that's not, that doesn't generally lead to, good discussion.
Well, obviously, also we live in slightly different reality in a way that, like, the conscious community here in Bali is quite different, and a lot of things like that would seem very mainstream maybe in the US, like, I don't know, people going to have hot dogs and watching the mainstream news and all that isn't so much part of the reality here. So it's
yeah.
Actually, are you coming to Bali soon?
I would love to. I don't know how soon I'll be able to get there, but I definitely want to get there because I love the gamelan music. That was something when I used to teach world music class, musical world cultures, and that was one of my favorite lessons was the gamelan section. But and I just know it's beautiful out there, and a lot of great fruit. One of the things that holds us back now that the traveling is so questionable with some of these laws, and I won't use any words that would get this video taken down. But we've past couple years, as a result of that, we've, in some respects, when it comes to like the freedom to travel and that kind of stuff, we've fallen way back because some places require certain things that we're not going to do in order to travel. And but yeah, if all that is dealt with, eventually I definitely want to get out there.
Yeah, well, actually, if people have an exemption, which is totally legal, it can work. But yeah, I understand it's a bit, I haven't traveled for 2.5 years. I've stayed here, and there's a whole lot of things with the traveling where I feel a little bit like I don't know, like a bitch, for lack of a better term, like being sprayed with that and being asked to show this and that. I'm like, yeah, I get it. So all good. But yeah, I've had I think we're good with this one. But I've had a couple of episodes censored in the past on YouTube, but this one's pretty
yeah. I'm real careful. I learned to be real, like, all right, I'm gonna stay right here, and because because what they're doing to me is they're going to old videos of mine before they implemented all of these new rules, and they're giving me strikes based on old videos. It was like, well, this wasn't illegal when I was talking about it then, but it's been rough. It's been rough on YouTube.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and that was a really exciting discussion. Do you have a last share for the listeners?
Yeah, if you want to plug in with me, go to mucusfreelife.com. And you can, all my stuff is on there. You check out, we got our book bundles, Mucusless Diet Healing System, annotated, revised, and edited edition. Yeah, sign up for our Insiders Club or newsletter, which you can get at mucusfreelife.com. I'm on Instagram, prof.spira, and YouTube, Professor Spira, Mucus Free Life LLC, and on Facebook, Professor Spira. And so, yeah, come check us out, plug in, and by all means, when I tell people to read the Mucusless Diet, whether you read my version or you read the version Alex has or whatever, or read all of them, just keep an open mind. Just go into that book with an open mind, no matter where you're coming from. Because if you're coming from a fruitarian raw foodist, keep an open mind through the transition diet lessons. If you read the book and you're coming from eating a standard diet, then keep an open mind about the foundation of human illness, and that it is possible to heal the human species of all of these degenerate diseases, that they come from what we eat. So just keep that open mind. You don't have to agree with everything. Like we pointed out, there's things that some of the philosophical elements can sometimes be off-putting to some people. You don't have to agree with everything to benefit from the methodological material, from the transition diet, from understanding the body as an air gas engine. Those are things that are self-evident and methodical. And what happened even for me and a lot of people is, after you've practiced the diet for a period of time, and you reread the book, then there's a number of things that you didn't agree with that now you totally like, oh, I see exactly what he's saying now. But you have to, have that experience. So definitely take action. Once you read everything and you study everything, you got to take action, because this is all about the actual living of these principles.
Thank you so much, Professor Spira. And I really want to acknowledge you for the work you're doing. Like, and see you're so chosen your purpose here and delivering it in a beautiful way. I think you're very important for the shift in consciousness and assisting that shift and ascension that's happening. So I really want to honor you and thank you for your dedication, for your time. Even now we've gone for more than 2 hours. I think it's like more than 9 p.m. right in the where you live. So thank you so much for that. I'm very grateful for your time and dedication.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who listened. If there's parts that you liked, of course, please share with your friends, like, subscribe, and everyone have a beautiful day. And yeah, definitely check out the Mucusless diet, or especially the annotated version. I put the links in the description of the YouTube video. Much love.